Hello, folks. I wanted to give a quick introduction to the biblical interpretation class we're working through with the How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. Those videos are already put up by the people at Zondervan, and they're excellent. I'm just going to add a few things just so you know who I am and how I can help you. In addition, I have an approach that's very much like Fee and Stewart's, but it is also a bit different in a couple of key ways, and I really do think it'll help. I've been at this for about 30 years. I became a senior pastor at a little church in Palo Alto, California when I was 26 years old. I'm now 54, so that was a while ago. And I just got my PhD in a New Testament. My expertise is Luke and Acts, and I wrote an overlong dissertation on that. You guys are welcome to read it. If you just ask, I'll send it to you. But good luck with that. It's a bit dense, and even my own professors had some words to me about that. They did say it was good. So anyway, you're welcome to read that, and I can talk about that with more if you'd like. Let's see. The goal of this course, I put it in the syllabus, which I think is posted or will be soon, is how to discover the theme of any given biblical text. And there's something specific about that I can share with you, but just to give you a quick example, a theme is something that usually starts with how the text begins and ends with how it ends. And whatever is parallel between beginning and end, but also different in the sense that it relies on the middle content, that's usually your theme. And there's a very specific but important way to recognize that. I'll give a quick example. At the beginning of Matthew, one of the names for Jesus is God with us. And at the end of Matthew, Jesus himself says, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age," and then gives us the commission there. So that God with us theme is one of the important things because you'll find it at the beginning and the end with some important differences between them. So that's just one example. I could give, as many more as all 66 books of the Bible. So that's quite important for understanding what a Bible's theme is. So the next thing is how to identify and analyze the convictions that give rise to a biblical text. Those you'll see most plainly when there are clear oppositions of action or dialogue. Anything that's worth fighting over or worth contending for, or meets up with some sort of opposition from, say, Satan, who likes to lie. So that is obviously the value of truth. Anytime there's something that is of contention or something to overcome, a conflict and a plot, all of that is where the convictions of the writing or the event itself lie. When the rulers of the age and humanity put Christ on the cross, and yet God raised him from the dead 3 days later, that elemental conflict tells you all you need to know about humans and all you need to know about God's power and his love and care for us. The issues of conflict are where the main convictions of any biblical text come from. So how to find those, analyze them, and make them kind of the main points of your sermon. A little hint there. Another thing that's a goal of the course is to help us to learn how to engage responsibly with the strategic provocations and deliberate enigmas of a biblical text. A lot of times they lead us down a certain path and then throw a curveball in there to get us to think and to reread and to ask some questions, and then to surprise us with some answers maybe we didn't expect. And there's a specific reason that biblical texts do that. So I'll help us figure that out. It's actually some of those pieces become things that folks identify as a so-called problem with the text, but actually I find they're normally deliberate and they're part of the meaning-enhancing strategy of the author. So I want to teach you how to find those and also distinguish them from our own problems that we bring to the text because we have a different set of convictions, some maybe modern presuppositions that don't mesh well with what the Bible's trying to say. A fourth goal is how to hear not just what is said, but also what is meant by a text. A text is never merely its code, it's always also its communicative intention. And so what the text often is a series of cues or prompts that lead us to make the intended inferences. If that sounds squishy and fuzzy, don't worry, it is not. There are inferences that the text wants us to make, and there's a bunch that we probably shouldn't make. And so we need to learn the difference between those two. But that's part of communication, is taking the coded part of the language, that is the text that is actually written or uttered, and using it as a prompt to follow the author's directions in making the appropriate inferences that he himself or she herself wants us to make. So the Bible does that too. We need to learn how to track with that and make responsible inferences that it wants us to make. A fifth goal is to learn how to stop interpreting. That may seem strange, but actually when you're interpreting the Bible, the biggest thing you need to do is to get the meaning intended and then move on. And one of the main problems that happens with commentators, theologians, and authors, and I don't know, some of the rest of us who study too hard, are we never stop interpreting. And that actually diffuses meaning to the point where you lose it. Ambiguity is a problem with texts, and it's not a problem of a lack of meaning, it's a problem with an overabundance of meaning. So how do you differentiate things that need to be, set apart, and how do you associate things that need to be associated? Once you do that, you move on. You don't need to keep interpreting. In fact, what you need to do is commit to the best available interpretation of the text, and then let it form your faith and obey it. That's what needs to happen. And so one of the things that interpreters need to learn to do is to stop interpreting and just start making reasoned judgments about the text that they can build off of and apply. So that's part of interpreting, is knowing when to stop. And the final one, how to hear the text in continuity with the community envisioned by its author. So the biblical texts were written a long time ago to their own communities of faith, whether that's Israel as a whole or some subset of them. Sometimes there's person-to-person communications, like between Paul and Timothy. There's also Paul's writing letters to his congregations. There's bodies of wisdom that are just collections of wisdom, and those are normally addressed to a young person, either a young man or a young woman who needs wisdom. There's all sorts of original audiences, and then our job is to put ourselves in the place of those audiences and make all the necessary translations that we need to make, given the fact that we are, in one sense, a different audience, kind of overhearing what God is saying to the first audience, although we are also part of God's direct audience as well. And so there's kind of a triangle that goes on between God, the author, the first audience, and then us as an extension of that first audience. And there's a special way to read the scriptures so that we make sure we're in the maximal continuity with the kind of audience God wants us to be, the people of God. We can bridge across the different times between biblical times and our times all we want, but basically our job is to be in maximal continuity with the kind of response God wants from the audience, and getting in touch with the first audience is the best way to be faithful to that. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do in this video is take just a little bit of time to explain how that is my approach is both like and unlike Fee and Stewart. So what I'm hoping to do is just sort of tweak some things and sort of supplement what they're saying as we go through the class. So while we're coming up with questions and essay questions, I'll be asking these sort of probing questions to move us beyond Fee and Stewart, but also to reinforce Fee and Stewart. So I'm a fan of theirs. I've read that book many times myself, and would use it in a text in my own New Testament intro classes. And have in fact. So here's the thing. Here's where I differ, just so we get right down to business. Most primers in biblical interpretation tend to explain why the text resists comprehension, and then they present various procedures for overcoming those problems. They talk about gaps in time, gaps in culture, gaps in language, And those are legitimate, and we do indeed need to bridge those gaps. The Fee and Stewart book talks a lot about those items. We're going to learn from their approach, but also extend it with my own that I've been practicing for years, like I mentioned. The two most frequently mentioned problems in exegesis primers are the ambiguities in the text that generate unresolvable disagreements. Fee and Stewart talk about that a lot. They'll talk about how, hey, everybody claims to be following the text, and yet there's all these disagreements about what it actually says. What do we do? We'll figure out. I have an approach to that. The second problem is the gap between history and the culture of the author, and that of us, the modern readers. And I have an approach to that as well. Our strategy as readers should be basically on the issue of ambiguities to cooperate with the text's own priorities. And what I've found is that the text, when it needs to be clear, will not leave itself ambiguous. There are points of clarity in every text, and if we can learn, a lot of times we read over those, and we're not particularly interested in them because our mind gravitates towards the strange, the problematic, the unanswered question. But actually, what the author was most concerned about, he left least to chance. And so he was the most clear about that. And so I think if we reprioritize our approach to really discipline ourselves to hit hardest where he's clearest, the issues about ambiguities will take their proper place several notches down in the priority list of the author. A lot of times, in fact, when we spend the most time on the most clear parts of it, what is ambiguous either is we'll find that it's of little importance to the author, and that's why he left it kind of out there on the edge, or we'll see that the ambiguity was deliberate and it was there to get us to think, and that will become part of the meaning structure that he's getting after as well. And in each case, we have a way to solve the problem. All right, so that's how I deal with that issue, and we'll go through how to do that as the time allows, and as your interest dictates. Ask me questions. I'll help you with whatever you come up with. The second problem is the gap between the author and the reader, and that's part of what the essay question that first comes up will ask you about. And so a couple of things can be said about that. First of all, the gap between the author and reader is the reason that the text exists. So it's not so much a problem, it's the whole purpose for the text. A text is a communication between people who are not present but are separated in time. Writing is a way of communicating to posterity. Even if, in principle, you could talk face-to-face with the person you're writing to, you write something for a reason. So it's kind of more of a permanent medium. And that already is important because when someone writes something, they write with its permanence in mind. And they also write with a potential gap between when the reader picks it up and when the author has read it. And so they've already accounted for some measure of that gap between author and reader. Now, of course, in a biblical setting, and modern readers, that gap is also a couple thousand years old or more. Of course, when you're dealing with Moses, he's another couple thousand beyond that. So that adds to the problem. I don't want to minimize that at all. I'm well aware of that problem. But just to let you know, the way to solve the problem is to follow the author's lead in overcoming the gap that's already there in his own mind while he's writing to his first audience, and use those same resources to overcome the rest of the gap in time and culture. Every writing is already designed to account for the kinds of gaps that we'll be dealing with, and we just have to kind of extend what it already does into our own situation. So that also leads us into the gap, not only with gap in culture, and time frame and all of that, but the gap between our convictions and that of the author. Again, the gap is part of why the text exists to begin with. No text would need to be written if the contents of the author's mind were already duplicated in our own mind. the whole purpose of communicating at all assumes that there is a difference, a gap between what the author wants us to believe and what he believes we already do believe. So he's always wanting us to move from position A to position B. And so that interest that defines why communication exists in the first place is already in the midst of overcoming a gap. And so what we need to do, once again, is cooperate with the author's own priorities and protocols for overcoming that gap. And that will help us to overcome the other more extensive gaps between our presuppositions as modern people and the author's presuppositions. He's already trying to move his first audience beyond their own presuppositions. So we need to get in their head and also see how that parallels and is an analogy with how our own way of thinking is addressed by that, and then let the author move us to where he wants us in an analogous way. So those two problems, uncertainties and gaps, deserve attention. The premise of our approach, that's slightly different than Fee and Stewart, is to avoid the assumption that artificial measures will be required to decode the Bible. What we need, rather, are organic measures to decode the Bible, just as it already wants to be decoded, but then extend those to the problems that Fee and Stewart also identify, which are the extended time and the different philosophies that we as moderns tend to ingest, often without realizing it. So we're going to try and read the Bible even more natively. It means reading it carefully, but also even more natively and not artificially. So I think Fee and Stewart do a good job of that. I just want to make sure that's always on our agenda. Those are the main things that my approach differs with. I'm not sure I need to say anything more now, and the video will get too long if I keep droning on. So I won't. But I'm so glad to be able to be of help to you all in another video, or possibly just I'll put it on the How to Read the Bible learning module from Zondervan. I'll put up the essay question if you don't already see it, and also a few other helps for how to answer it. The first one is a doozy, so they won't all be like that, but this first one's designed to get us thinking, and go ahead and give that a look and write me something fun. 1 or 2 pages, the format is in the syllabus, an introductory paragraph, 1 or 2 paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph restating the introduction, but now from the point of view of having moved through your argument in favor of whatever answer to the question that you want to give. All right? So I'll put that up for you, and I'll put up this video as well, and hope to see you soon. Please do email me with questions. That would be great. I'd love to talk to you. And all right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.